Now we know a central component of Islam's existence was conquest and subjugation, but why does it persist even in the modern age? Here are the 4 main reasons I have identified and why all 4 are under major threat in the modern world. Number 4. Birth rate. According to Pew Research, June 2025, Islam is only growing by birth rate. Conversion is doing nothing for its growth, and it seems even this is drastically reducing.
And I'd point out here, then people are like, well, don't some Muslim populations have a high fertility rate? Muslims are not high fertility, they're poor, okay? This is a mistake that people make. Muslims actually have a lower fertility than Protestant groups when you control for income. And their fertility rate is so low that despite the relative poverty of the Middle East, only Iran, you were saying, what was it, Iraq?
Only Iraq.
Only Iraq
beats Israel. So there's a Cremieux, this was all inspired by him because he's so freaking amazing. We love him. He posted on X basically like a clarification to people, because especially in X, there's a whole like, the Muslims. He writes, there's a myth that the Islamic world has figured out fertility, but it has not. They show the same declining fertility rates that other places have. Barring Iraq, the Middle East has lower fertility rates than Israel. And hopefully you can put this graph that he shared up on the screen showing this just overall declining fertility graph and infertility rates, births per women in the Middle East, basically, with Iraq at the top, then Israel, then Algeria, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Oman, Libya, and so on, with the UAE at the bottom. But I love the UAE because you're going to see they have my very favorite pernatalist policy. I can't wait to get to it. And this graph that we're seeing really tracks global fertility rates in general. And that's an argument that Cremieux makes in the comments of this thread, where people are like, oh, what about this? What about that? And he's just pointing out, no, everywhere this is happening. And that, I think, is a really important theme of all this. So he continues in his thread, exceptions, maybe Yemen and maybe Palestine, both of which have terrible data. So their comparative situation is unclear. But 2 things on that. Firstly, Jewish fertility is ahead of Arab fertility in Israel. And he shows a graph of fertility rates in Israel. Even their famously fecund culture is not immune to the global baby bust, not in Denmark. And then he shows basically after Muslim immigrants spend some time in Denmark, their fertility plummets. They normalize to normal Denmark fertility levels. He continues, nor in France. And even if we look at 2nd-generation immigrants, not shown in the graph he had, but linked below, and we can link to his same sources, and then he shares his sources. And basically he shows that the diaspora that's Middle Eastern also doesn't have great fertility. So once they leave, because a lot of people were like, okay, yeah, fine, in these countries they're bad, but then they go to other countries and that's where they're spreading so much. But no, sweeties, no. So like 1, the source is drying up, and 2, once the diaspora goes out there, they drop in fertility even faster. So let's fly over to Saudi Arabia, whose TFR has declined from over 7 in the 1970s, woof, to 2.4 in recent years. So the government has been a little bit less aggressive in this case with prenatalist policies, I think, because they're like, oh, 2.4 is fine, like we're doing great. But they are focusing more on economic diversification. And I think that's actually really smart. Because, another element that really predicts good fertility is good economic prospects. And I think Saudi Arabia very reasonably is like, we can't depend on this one industry forever. In terms of, more births, whole thing about this is a fertility stack. It's a bunch of factors. Most of these countries have multi-pronged strategies here. We've got the payouts, we've got the extended leave, we've got the cultural leadership, and it's still not working.
Number 3, religious conditioning. Once you are taught something from an early age and your family heritage becomes tied to it, it is not just a belief, it becomes an intrinsic part of someone's identity. Denying it would psychologically mean rejecting one's family and heritage.
From when I was 6 years old until I was 14 years old, I pretended to be Muslim. And I wasn't doing this consciously. I just knew deep down inside that I did not care about this. But I came from a Muslim family. I went to Islamic school until I was in 2nd grade. And after I switched over into public school, I went to Islamic school on Friday nights and Saturday mornings. Sometimes Sunday too. All right, so I was forced to pray, forced to learn Quran, forced to hear about these hadiths, forced to wear the hijab. I had no say, and I truly didn't even care because my parents' relationship was toxic. So what I cared about more was not pissing them off, because the consequences of pissing them off was worse than pretending to be Muslim.
Just goes to show you what really matters in life. It's not Islam, Hadith, Quran, Sunnah, all this stuff. It's your family members' relationships. Are they good people? Do they get along? Do they treat you well? Do they take care of the kids?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh boy.
So I just pretended. When I was 14 years old, my grandma and my grandpa on my mom's side came to visit us, and 3 weeks into the visit, my grandpa had a heart attack and passed away. That was my first encounter with death. And that was the first moment that I realized, oh, this is gonna happen to me at one point. I was like, I'm gonna die. So I should probably start taking this seriously, because I'm gonna die. So from 14 years old until 18 years old, I did a complete 180. I started memorizing Quran on my own. I started committing to my daily prayers. I started fasting, even on days when I wasn't supposed to be fasting. I did the most. And during those 4 years of my life, I was the favorite child in the family. My sisters and my mom can attest to this. I was the favorite because I went above and beyond to do the most. And I saw how much love from my parents was tied to religiousness. So the connection was made in my brain. Unconditional love is not a thing. Do these daily rituals, you'll receive love and praise, and no one will be breathing down your back. Except, like I said, my parents' relationship was toxic. So during those 4 years, their marriage was the absolute worst. And I was like, I gotta get out of this house.
So this again shows us how, many Muslim kids, they're taught that the more religious I am, the more I'll be loved. It's not about being a good person. I mean, it is about being a good person, because that's how they define good person. But they're defining good person more in terms of your relationship to God than necessarily you being a good person, right?
Yeah, and I think this can be said in general about relationships in the Muslim community, whether you're born into it, whether you convert to it. A lot of these relationships are conditional based on you practicing, how much you practice. And yeah, that's a positive reinforcement. Oh, if I do all of these rituals and, wear this and I do that, and I'll get love. I'm not going to get love if I don't submit and obey my parents in this way.
Yeah.
And she probably felt some degree of responsibility for the happiness or yet the happiness of her parents' marriage, or maybe keeping the marriage more together. Maybe she felt like if she, practiced and, showed them what a good daughter she's turning out to be, a good Muslim daughter, that it might make their relationship better. It probably goes even deeper, right, than what she's initially told us. There's probably a lot more layers to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can imagine this is what keeps the religion going too. It's this sort of cultural / parental enforcement of the practices.
There is a rise of these cultural Muslims who are Muslim in name only. This would be kind of like the way a lot of people in the West celebrate Christmas. I believe this group of nominal Muslims will grow rapidly. Number 2, denial. This is often mislabeled as taqiyya. However, this is often simply denial and the self-defense mechanism it generates. You see this regularly in debates. When Muslims are told things, they form a defense where they are not just trying to convince others, they are subconsciously trying to convince themselves, as facing the truth is far more difficult and catastrophic for their identity. A few ways this is done is denying the legitimacy of scripture when they reveal things that are unpleasant, supporting the ring fencing of knowledge where only certain learned people can discuss religious matters, and referring to Arabic as a special language that cannot be translated. And then there are just plain lies and obfuscation. In the following clip, you will see examples of all of this.
Right, is there such a thing as Sharia law?
Yes.
There is?
Yes.
So when I talk about Sharia law,
Yeah.
I am valid in speaking about Sharia law.
You're not as a person.
Why?
You are not educated enough or an expert in Sharia law.
Are you?
Neither am I, no.
Are the Muslims here?
No.
So do you go around telling the Muslims they shouldn't be speaking on Sharia law?
If someone was to make a stupid comment like you did earlier, yeah, I would.
I would like to see that. I really would.
Right, directly someone who's talking about Sharia law.
Shamsi.
You're the only one. You're the only one that
So,
comes here to
what
this
does
bar
Sharia law-
all the time
you can
and goes,
answer the
Sharia law says this, Sharia law says
What
that.
does Sharia law say about homosexuals?
Don't worry,
What should
you are
happen?
not, me and you are not educated enough to
Answer
talk
my
about Sharia law.
question. What does it say?
What say?
What should happen to homosexuals?
Neither me nor you.
That's what I'm saying. We know. All this building.
You're not educated enough, and neither am I. I remember myself.
Wait, if you're saying... No, I'm not recording.
Educated enough to talk about what the problem should be in Sharia law.
So what you're saying is, I'm wrong, but you aren't in a position to tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I admit that.
Right. Get that logic. I'm wrong, but he's not in a position to tell me
I can
that
tell
I'm
someone
wrong.
they're wrong and say, but I'm not educated enough to correct
I
you. That's
propose a
nothing wrong with
premise
that.
to you that in Sharia law it says homosexuals
say
should
that.
be killed.
Where does
You're
it say
saying
that?
it doesn't.
It says chuck him for the tallest building.
Huh?
Chuck him for the tallest mountain or something like that. Yeah, or the building. Like the Shard.
So, I take it obviously...
Let me explain to you what the Sharia law is.
Yeah, go on, tell us.
You have to study Islam, the religion,
Yeah.
years and years before
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
make rulings on
Yeah.
what is and isn't considered authentic in Sharia.
And the fact that
based by
those
God.
rulings are contradictory, does that not trouble you?
So you know about Sahih Bukhari and Tirmidhi and all that?
Yeah.
So we can look at those.
Well, they're authentic until they're embarrassing, and then Muslims say they're not authentic. But go on.
You just
That's fine.
No, you're just being argumentative. It's arbitrarily. Anyway. So we can look at those and say these are authentic. But there could have been mistakes in those books, or the scholars may have made a mistake looking at the hadith. They may have looked at hadith that is not as authentic as others. I don't know that because I haven't studied it in detail.
You know, brother, this fog that you have is what just stops you from seeing the truth. Because
Don't tell me, God.
if you actually think about what you're saying, what you've got is a corpus of literature that Muslims themselves can't agree on. They don't know which ones are trustworthy, and then they're trying to say that you can base judgments on these hadiths. But because they don't agree about which ones are trustworthy, they come to different conclusions. Here's your problem, your logical problem.
Go on.
Right.
Go on, explain it to me.
You have said at the beginning of this conversation
That I am not educated enough.
that you are not educated enough.
Yes.
And I agree you can find a scholar in Islam that says it's okay to vote.
Yeah.
And I am certain that I can find a scholar in Islam that says that it isn't okay to vote.
Yeah, you probably. Yeah.
So if we have two scholars who are not ignorant, who are both using the Quran and the Hadiths, but coming to completely contradictory...
They might be using different...
Well, let me finish. Coming to completely contradictory answers, how can you decide who is right amongst them?
Well, by looking at what sources they follow, what their beliefs are, that kind of
But that means that then you're in a position to judge the scholars on their use of the material, which would mean that you're now above your scholars.
In what way would that mean I'm above my scholar?
Because you've just said, if I have to make a judgment between scholar A who says X and scholar B who says Z, and these two scholars are using the same sources, and the way I can judge between them
I see what you're saying.
is that I look at the sources and I make a judgment about who's right and wrong. You're then saying that you're the scholar.
Okay, so in Islam, we believe that God gave us intellect. We have the ability to critically analyse and say and look at what people have said. We have that ability. God has given us that ability to critically analyse different pieces and come to decisions. So if I were to look at what this scholar has said and say, no, that's wrong because of this, this, and this, that's fine.
So, Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old child. Was he right or wrong?
Firstly, let's dispute the sources about what
There we go. You see, once the sources are an embarrassment to them, they shut them away.
That's true!
No, it's Sahih al-Bukhari. It's Sahih. It's Sahih
No, but it needs to be
al-Bukhari.
said. It needs to be said that the sources do dispute her age.
Give me a source that says she was older.
Can I finish? If we take the source that she was 9, which is fine for this argument, we can.
Right, let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. just a disclaimer for the camera. So, just for the sake of this argument, we're saying she was 9.
She was 9.
But disclaimer,
And
there are disputing sources.
No. Let's be clear. Actually, there are sources that Muslims construct an argument from that she was older.
There are sources that
But
say
they
she
don't.
was older.
No, they don't say she was older.
But no, for the purpose of this conversation, let's just say she was 9.
Right. So, do you agree with that?
So when did they actually do the deed?
It
wasn't when she was 9.
No, it is when she was 9. It says they consummated the marriage when she was 9. You said if a child has a period, what does that mean? And I said it does not mean they can have children. And then you said yes, it does.
They are ready. Sorry.
Biologically, it means they can have children.
A child who.
No, but I mean biologically, if we take out conditioning and everything, when somebody starts to menstruate, that means that they're
It is
able to
not
have
true.
children.
Women.
I'm a doctor.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, if a child, if you're a doctor, now be honest. When a child first starts to bleed in menstruation, is there always an egg?
It wasn't her first menstruation.
Generally, but we won't say it's the rule, but even adult women might not always have an egg when they
And are you
bleed.
saying that physically and mentally a
I
child?
didn't say mentally.
Muslims try to say that Muhammad is a moral example, which if he is a moral example, the best moral example, then you have no justification to say that 9-year-old children should not have children.
No, the argument is the 9-year-old 1400 years ago is not exactly the same as the 9-year-old. So the argument is void.
What's void, sorry?
A 9-year-old 1400 years ago is nothing like a 9-year-old today. So the
There is
conversation-
no.
It's
I'm sorry.
violently-
This sister, this is utter rubbish. This argument that there's been some evolutionary
No, but
leap
I
in the last
personally don't think she
1400
was
years
nine,
is
so I'm
absolutely rubbish. Your point is essentially that we couldn't calculate the age, and there are other hadiths that say she was different ages.
Yes.
One second. I have never ever seen these hadiths be produced, and this is an argument that's been gone on. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. So no, hold on one second. Hold on one second.
Let's exchange information.
I'll send you. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Right. So your argument is that we can't know her age.
Yes, perfect.
The hadiths give contradictory ages.
Yeah, and the hadith is not a word of
How
Quran.
can we trust a source like the hadiths if they are
Okay, so
contradictory?
this is the okay. So
But the point is,
let me finish something.
But the point is,
let me finish something here.
but Islam is dependent upon the use of hadith.
No, it's not.
Are you a Quran only Muslim?
I'm not saying I'm a Quran only.
Do you even know what a Quran only Muslim is?
Let me say something. Okay,
Right.
no,
So
no,
are you a Quran only?
no, I'm not.
Or do you use
let
hadiths?
me say something here. I'm talking here.
What's the Quran say?
Okay, let me say something.
Do you use hadiths?
Yes, I do.
I know you do. Do you?
Not as much as most Muslims.
Okay, so
But you do use hadith.
okay.
So hadiths are important. So if your hadiths are contradictory, how can you trust them? As I was saying, Muslims use the hadiths to understand how to practice Islam, because the Quran gives an outline but it doesn't give the detail. The hadiths is what gives you the detail. Example, the use of salah
Are
and
you
how you
expert
pray
on
salah.
Islam or I'm
One
representing
second.
Islam side?
One
not you.
second. Here you are interrupting again. Yeah.
If I'm here to listen to you, Islamic
The
perspective.
fact of the
then-
matter is,
Yeah.
those hadiths contradict one another. They aren't trustworthy sources, and Muslims can't agree upon them.
I say, I just told you my point of view is, now again, you lied about the Quran where
Not
it doesn't
really.
mention about the marriage.
Okay, show
so let
me.
me say something.
Show me.
I'm going to tell you something.
What's the
so
age?
now,
According to the Quran, what's the
Quran
age?
says,
Yeah.
Quran says, the first, there's 2 standards. And then they both have to meet
Yes.
for girls to marry. The first one is the period. The second one is when she can make a decision about her property.
Where does it say that in the Quran?
Okay, now I cannot produce it, but it doesn't go
All right,
away.
we'll just assume
okay,
that it
now
does.
this is
We'll
on the
assume that
recording,
it does.
right?
We'll
okay,
assume
so
that it
now
does. We'll
there's
assume that
no
it does.
better way. The Islam is the best teaching.
Period and mental capacity.
Capacity who can make decision about her property.
Right, fine.
So it's been, it's
Aisha was 6 years old when she
Again?
was
Oh,
married.
man.
but
Come
we
on, you
don't
know,
agree.
see, man,
You don't agree because it embarrasses you and quoting hadith.
There's 4 different
Again,
hadiths which
again,
say
show me the
different
Quran.
ages.
Go on, show me them.
Man, you know, you asked me a question. If there's in Quran, there's no mention about the marriage.
What does it say?
It's two things.
Yeah, it says it here. Look, I'll show you what it says in the Quran about marriage.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I like I need the Quran. This is not a Quran. This is a translation.
I agree with you. It's not a Quran. Islam is not a religion for anyone other than Arabs. Don't buy the sale.
Thank you. My God. That's not the Quran because it's not in Arabic, yeah?
It's not in Arabic. Arabic has to be with it. You know,
This is what the Quran says about marriage. Are you listening? In the Hadiths, Sahih al-Bukhari 762, narrated by Aisha, that the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. Hisham said, I have been informed that Aisha remained with the Prophet for 9 years, till his death. So in that hadith, Aisha is giving her age at what point Muhammad consummated the marriage with her. Other translations of this verse by other scholars, other Muslim scholars, don't translate it in this way. The way they translate it is those who have not yet reached the age of menstruation. This one doesn't. But other translators do, and we have the example of the hadiths as well.
Are you fluent in Arabic?
Are you?
No, I'm asking you.
No, I'm not. Are you?
So how could you know the translation?
Right, are you fluent in Arabic?
My sister is.
Are you?
I asked you that question first.
Yes, and I've answered that.
So then
And
how
now I'm
are you
asking
relying
you,
on
are you
something
fluent
that
in
could
Arabic?
possibly not
Are you
exist?
fluent in Arabic? Right, so your argument is, because I'm not fluent in Arabic, I can't make this argument.
No, that's what I said. How do you know the translation of Arabic?
How do we know? Well, Yusuf Abdullah Ya'ali was a linguist. Yusuf Ali, he was a linguist. So he was someone who was fluent in Arabic, and he translated it into English. So I'm using a Muslim linguist who translated the Arabic Quran. So I think that's valid. My problem isn't the fact that this happened. My problem is the fact that this man is your moral example. That's my problem.
What's the legal age in the Bible?
6 or 9. It was after her period.
No, it says it here. Look, narrated by Aisha. I'm quoting Sahih al-Bukhari 762-64. Narrated by Aisha that the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old.
This is incorrect. That's it. This is incorrect.
Why isn't it correct?
It's not correct.
Why is it not correct?
Incorrect translation.
Why? Do you know? Have you seen the original?
What did I tell you?
You've seen the
I've read the
original.
Quran. This is an incorrect translation.
This is a hadith. It's not a Quran.
All right, there you go. There you go. That's your whole.
But you just said you'd read the original and it was incorrect.
That's the original word of Islam. That is it. There is anything else is an interpretation. Anything else.
So you're a Quran-only
anything.
Muslim?
Quran is the way. Quran is what we
So you don't use
Quran is
hadiths?
given by God to us. As
Are you a Quran-only Muslim? Do you use hadiths? Right, so hadiths are valid then, sources of knowledge, yeah?
Well, hadiths are valid only to the extent that they can be verified
Agreed.
by scholars.
And Sahih
and
is-
also if they don't contradict what's inside the Quran.
Brilliant. So the Sahih, is that reliable or unreliable?
It's deemed reliable by
It's deemed reliable. So I'm quoting a reliable hadith. So unless you're a Quran-only Muslim, the
Okay,
argument
and what did I
stands.
tell you?
However, the number one reason I believe Islam persists is ignorance. Muslims are not encouraged to think critically. They mindlessly repeat verses in a language they don't have to understand. Just repeat it and it makes you a good person. That's the number one thing that matters. Worship and leave the thinking to scholars. Communities form echo chambers that generate a sanitized version of the religion. If you do not want to know the truth, then you will not know it. In many ways, our lives are littered with reassuring lies that conceal some of its ugliness, and Islamic communities are built upon them. A central factor in this has been Arabic as a language barrier. However, when you strip this away, the scriptures begin to sound rather silly.
Something I've always found fascinating about the Quran is its chapter titles. You'd expect the holiest book of a religion to have grand sweeping titles, right? Like salvation, justice, creation, the cosmos, I don't know, even mitochondria, bacteria, things like that for its time, and enhancing human knowledge, proving its divinity to some degree. Yet instead, what do you get? Chapters named after animals, fruits, household objects, and even weather events. I'm not even joking you. If you pull up the Quran's chapters in English, there's the cow, the bee, the ant, the spider, the elephant, the fig, the star, the sun, the moon, the smoke, the mountain, the pen, the table spread, the cave, the women, that's the one about beating us, if you didn't know, Surah Nisa, the Romans, the hypocrites, the iron, the light, the earthquake, the time, the dawn, and the people, to name but a few. As you can see, it's as if every random noun in the Arabic language was thrown into this divine bingo machine, and it's like a raffle. Now, each title supposedly connects to something mentioned inside the chapter, so either a story or a metaphor or a symbol. But when you read them in sequence, it doesn't feel like a coherent revelation at all. It feels more like a mishmash, like a collage. You've got one chapter, for example, about social law, and the next is about insects. The next is about prophets, very important. And then suddenly about a pen writing on a tablet in heaven that was eternal. And that's how the word of God was preserved, apparently. But the point is, it's so obviously a 7th century aspiring to be spiritual type of stream of consciousness. Take the cow, for example, Surah al-Baqarah in Arabic. It's the second and longest chapter of the Quran, yet most of it isn't even about cows. It's about legal codes, warfare, of course, and obedience, once again, of course. The cow that the whole chapter is named after is just a fleeting reference to a story about Israelites who refused to sacrifice an animal. So the title ends up being non sequitur, remembered only because it's quirky. And to be fair, it's true. I always remembered Surah al-Baqarah because it's the chapter of the cow. Then you have, I promise you this isn't out of a children's bedtime book. This is genuinely the Quran. You can look it up if you don't believe me. Then you have the chapter of the bees. Again, a chapter that's, I'm really trying to keep a straight face as I explain this to you, but it's proving very difficult. So please bear with me. So the chapter of the bees. Now, again, the chapter is mostly theological instruction, but is remembered for a few verses about bees producing honey by divine inspiration. Another one I found hilariously ridiculous when I ended up reading it as an adult in English without all the bias and the awe factor surrounding it, ready to be blown away, was the story of the 7 sleepers of the cave. This appears in the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, also known as the Cave, verses 9 to 26. And this story was taken right out of Christian mythology, as many other fables and tales that you find in the Quran are taken from various other mythologies and spin-offs of various different religions at the time. But check how absurdly the Quran writes it from God, this chapter detailing this story. So the verse tells the tale of a group of young believers who take refuge in a cave to escape persecution, and then they're miraculously made to sleep for many years before waking. So the Quran reads about these sleepers. Some will say they were 3, their dog was the 4th, while others will say they were 5, their dog was the 6th, only guessing blindly. And others will say they were 7 and their dog was the 8th. Say, O prophet, my Lord knows best their exact number. Only a few people know as well. Okay, Allah. This is meant to be God. This is your final message to me. That load of nonsense. What is this exclusive club you've got going on, mister? Who are these? There's a few other people that know as well. Who? What is the point of that? How is that supposed to benefit humankind? It's just nonsense. So, yeah. Sorry, it's just, when you strip it back, it's just, that's too much. You really can't take this stuff seriously. When people build myths, they borrow from what's around them, what they can see, what their lived experience is. Animals, nature, everyday life. The things that they are confronted with on the regular, the things that they're trying to make sense of, the things that they have mastered, the things that they're trying to master. The spider's web, the ant colony, the fig tree, the sun and the moon, these are clearly building blocks of Bronze Age storytelling. They give the text its very basic color, but they also date it. They show us that the Quran, like every other ancient scripture, was a product of its time, not a transcript from beyond time that's eternal, from some higher being that is trying to communicate with us through chapters like these. So when people tell me the Quran is perfect in structure and language, and they put that challenge to many of us ex-Muslim apostates about bring something like it. Nobody can write anything like the Quran, the rhyme, the Arabic, the alliteration, the allegories, nothing can be produced on the same level, no literary piece of work. When I hear that, I just think of that long list of chapter names of cows and bees and ants and spiders, pens, tablets, thunder, iron, smoke, and figs, and just smile to myself, because it reads a lot less like divine architecture and truly like the world's first anthology of bedtime, children's bedtime parables.
Now, what has been a major driver of ignorance? Lack of education. What facilitates this? Poverty. And poverty has plagued the Islamic world for centuries. But why is this? Why are Islamic countries so poor?
Of the 57 member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, over 80% are classified as low-income or middle-income countries. Only 11 are classified as high-income, and most of those, oil money. That's not just underperformance. That's collapse-level poverty spread across 1.8 billion people. Strip away the Gulf petrodollars, and what's left is a civilization in economic freefall. 40% of the world's Muslims live on $3 a day. And it's not just about money, it's about opportunity, education, infrastructure, hope. Qatar and the UAE sit high thanks to oil, but countries like Egypt, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, with hundreds of millions of people, linger at levels barely above subsistence. Meanwhile, Singapore, a city-state with no oil, no Islamic law, and 6 million people, produces a higher GDP than entire regions of the Muslim world combined. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. This wasn't always the case. In fact, for centuries, the Islamic world was the opposite of poor. It was the richest, most advanced civilization on earth. So what the hell happened? How did the wealthiest civilization on earth become one of the poorest in just a few centuries? The answer begins not with money, but with a mindset. Rewind to the 8th through 12th centuries. The Islamic world was the global superpower. Baghdad, the jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate, was among the largest cities on earth. Over 1 million people, streetlights, libraries, universities. While London was a muddy backwater, Cordoba in Islamic Spain had 400,000 residents, paved roads, and a culture that made European monarchs look like barbarians. Muslim scholars gave the world algebra, algorithms. They helped spread the concept of zero, advances in medicine, astronomy, and chemistry that wouldn't be matched in Europe for centuries. Islamic merchants controlled trade routes from Spain to India. The annual Hajj doubled as the world's largest trade fair. At its peak around the year 1000, the Middle East alone produced roughly 10% of global GDP, far above its population share. Being a Muslim country in that era meant prosperity, innovation, and power. So how did the world's most advanced civilization begin to freeze as the rest of the world caught fire? The answer lies in a series of choices made by elites, enforced by clerics, and calcified into law that would strangle economic growth for centuries. And it started in the realm of ideas. Before we get to banks and corporations, we need to understand what happened to Islamic thought itself. During the Golden Age, Muslim scholars embraced rational inquiry. But in the 12th century, Orthodox Ash'ari theology gained dominance with a fundamentally different view. Physical events don't happen because of natural laws, but because God wills them, moment by moment. Fire doesn't burn because of chemistry. It burns because God makes it burn, right now, in this instant. Meanwhile, in Europe, the scientific method was taking root. The idea that nature follows consistent laws we can discover and harness. One civilization was building telescopes and steam engines. The other was debating whether studying the stars violated God's sovereignty. This philosophical split set the stage for everything that followed. But abstract theology wasn't the only chain. On the ground, something even more destructive was happening, quietly, legally, and generation after generation. The very laws meant to uphold fairness were breaking the economy apart. Islamic law mandates that when someone dies, wealth must be divided among all children, spouses, and parents. Wealthy Muslim men often had multiple wives and many children. When a merchant died, his business empire would be split into a dozen tiny pieces. Worse, the business itself would be dissolved upon death. You couldn't pass a company to your heir intact. Every generation, you'd start over. The result? Businesses stayed small, short-lived. Most Ottoman businesses were partnerships of just two people. Meanwhile, Europe invented the corporation, entities that could outlive their founders and pool massive capital. The Dutch East India Company, founded in 1602, was the first publicly traded corporation in history. It raised vast capital, funded global voyages, and outlived generations of shareholders. It was immortal, powerful, scalable. Muslim merchants lacked these legal tools. No stock exchanges, no corporate personhood. When a wealthy Ottoman merchant died, his business died with him, fragmented by inheritance law, unable to scale across generations. By the 1800s, the largest traders and bankers in Ottoman lands were Greeks, Armenians, Jews, and Europeans. Muslim entrepreneurs, bounded by Sharia inheritance and interest bans, simply couldn't compete. The Ottoman Empire had effectively outsourced its own economy to minorities and foreigners. And here's where it gets worse. Islam, like early Christianity, banned usury, charging interest on loans. But while Europe evolved, building modern credit markets, the Muslim world held firm. No interest, ever. Without fully developed banks or capital markets, scaling a business became almost impossible. French businesses in the 1700s could borrow at 5% interest. Ottoman businesses tried 20% or more from shadow lenders if they could get credit at all. By the time the Industrial Revolution hit Europe, the Muslim world was still operating on medieval economic structures that hadn't changed in 500 years. Here's where the numbers tell the brutal truth. By 1700, before a large-scale European colonial conquest even began, the Middle East share of global GDP had already collapsed. The economic decline was well underway centuries before colonialism. This wasn't Europe exploiting the Muslim world. This was the Muslim world falling behind on its own, trapped by institutions that once worked but had become chains. But centuries of economic stagnation didn't stay confined to the marketplace. Eventually, it began to rot something far more dangerous: the state itself. Starting in the 12th century, something dangerous began to take hold. Rulers needed legitimacy beyond military power, so they struck a deal with the ulema, religious scholars who interpreted Islamic law. The deal? Rulers would enforce the cleric's interpretation of Sharia. In return, clerics would declare the rulers legitimate in the eyes of God. The throne and pulpit became one. The clerics gained power. They controlled education, law, and culture, and they feared change. The madrasas became echo chambers, producing clerics who could recite scripture but couldn't question it. In Europe, universities were emerging as centers of debate. In the Muslim world, education became about memorization, not inquiry. And when you build an education system around memorization rather than inquiry, you don't produce innovators, you produce enforcers. But if you think controlling minds was extreme, wait until you see what they did to the information itself. Gutenberg's printing press revolutionized Europe in the mid-1400s. Within 50 years, more books were printed in Europe than had been copied by hand in the previous millennium. But in the Ottoman Empire, the printing press was banned for Arabic script for nearly 200 years. Why? Clerics feared that printing would allow unvetted interpretations of the Quran to spread, undermining their monopoly on religious knowledge. It wasn't until 1727 that the first Ottoman printing press was allowed to operate, and even then, it could only print secular works. By the time the Muslim world embraced mass printing, Europe had experienced multiple intellectual revolutions. Ottoman literacy rate in 1900 was under 10%. In fact, Turkey's literacy in 1960 was roughly on par with the Netherlands' literacy in the 15th century. Centuries of lost ground. But the intellectual lockdown went deeper than just books. It reached into science itself, and what happened there would seal the Muslim world's fate for centuries. During the Islamic Golden Age, there had been open debate between rationalist philosophers and traditionalist theologians. By the late medieval period, orthodoxy prevailed. In 1577, Ottoman scholar Taqi al-Din built a world-class observatory in Constantinople, today Istanbul. And then it was shut down. Clerics deemed common observations as bad omens. Taqi al-Din's observatory was demolished just a few years after opening, not by war, but by decree. Muslim thinkers like Averroes, who tried to reconcile Aristotle with Islam, were denounced and silenced. His books were burned and his ideas were branded heresy. Manuscripts were destroyed, printing presses banned, libraries fell into dust while Europe built the Enlightenment on the very knowledge Muslims had once preserved. Whole generations grew up believing science was foreign, innovation was suspicious, and questioning anything was dangerous. It's not just that the Muslim world stopped innovating, it forgot how to want innovation. By 1700, the Muslim world had largely stopped producing original scientific work, and the numbers today tell the story. Israel, 9.5 million people, produces more scientific papers per year than the entire Arab world of almost 500 million. Muslims had won fewer than 1% of Nobel Prizes in science. Jews, 0.2% of the world's population, have won around 20%. Ahmed Zewail, an Egyptian chemist who won the Nobel Prize in 1999, did his revolutionary work at Caltech, not Cairo University. The talent exists, the infrastructure to nurture it doesn't. Female labor participation in the Middle East is around 20%, the lowest in the world. Let that sink in. 4 out of 5 women in the region either can't work or don't work. Some of this is cultural, some of it's illegal. Male guardianship laws, restrictions on women's work, unequal inheritance. Women in many Muslim-majority countries can't open a bank account without a male relative's permission, can't travel freely, can't start a business without approval. In Saudi Arabia, women only gained the right to drive in 2018. Before that, a grown woman with a PhD couldn't legally drive herself to work. In Iran, women are arrested for not wearing hijab properly. In Afghanistan, under Taliban rule, girls are banned from secondary education entirely. But the economic impact goes far beyond individual freedom. A 2018 IMF report estimated that if women in the Middle East participated in the labor force at the same rate as men, regional GDP could increase by 47%. nearly half the economy locked away because of laws written centuries ago. The entire Arab world, almost 500 million people, translates fewer books each year than Greece, a country of just 10 million. Think about that information gap. While the world's knowledge explodes exponentially, much of the Muslim world remains linguistically and intellectually isolated.
However, as much as ignorance can persist for a lifetime, the internet is in our pockets and at our fingertips. The internet is the great democratizer of knowledge. Nothing will escape it. Islam may always exist in some form, but it is on the verge of shattering into tiny pieces. What will remain will look nothing like it does now.